Patrick Johnson, here we are. So, typically you would be in Philadelphia
Yeah.
getting ready for a game, or maybe not typically, considering since we've done these videos, we've been working remotely. I know we're exploring traveling and getting back on the
Yeah.
road. Are you serious? Now, I know you've got a couple of young kids, but seriously, are you missing the opportunity not to be in Philadelphia today and in Detroit tomorrow?
Well, I mean, they're two rinks I've never been to, so I think all things considered, would love to be there. But obviously, the equation is still there's sort of personal sort of how do you actually feel about it, and I think it depends on where you go because there are places in the U.S. where we see it watching sports every week, don't we? They're just like, hey, COVID's over. Um, yeah, it's one I think. I mean, the fact that we aren't going yet, I think has been easy because I don't even have to think about it. But there are places like Seattle where all things considered, it's been a pretty good story, and you're interested in going. Like there are places I would be okay with going, and I think mostly if they're near a coast. I think it's well. Sorry, I should be clear. If it's near a coast and not humid, I'll be fine. Does that make sense?
As long as you're comfortable. Like, let's not
Yeah.
worry about the readers or about the cover. As long as you're
No, yeah.
comfortable.
Forget everybody else.
How
No,
does Texas rank? Would you go
yeah,
to Dallas? It's not that far from a coast, but it is kind of humid.
but
But it's
yeah,
Texas.
it is one of those ones though where being there, being able to, that story I did on Bo Horvat, like that wouldn't, Zoom's okay and phone's okay, but when you're able to stand across from the person and actually have that interaction and it helps with Horvat. Obviously, he's a guy that he knows who I am, and we've been around each other for a while, and he's used to how I operate and knows what I'm about. Um,
Like he knows you wear avocado shirts.
exactly. I brought it back.
Yeah.
First video of the season. It was just for you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, absolutely. It's funny that, Canucks are on back-to-backs, and here we are planning for it still from Vancouver. And I do get the feeling now with the border open, things
Yeah.
will change at some point. But let's talk a little bit about, obviously, we're going to avoid what happens in the games at this point. But let's talk a little bit about the team because this is our first one doing it this season. I remember doing a podcast with Ed Willis probably 4 years ago where he was talking about this is Jim Benning's, this
Right.
is it. Like he has to get this sorted out this year or
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
done. And here we are,
Yeah.
4 years later, and we're still talking about like, oh, is this Jim Benning's last chance? There's no doubt he swung for the fences this year. Many significant changes to the team at a sacrifice of some assets. But if you take
Yeah. Yeah.
if you take at face value that the team really needs to make that leap now,
Yeah.
are they going to be able to? And if not, what do they still have to do?
I don't think they are. I mean, I think even they admittedly know that, it's always smart. Don't, set your your own expectations too high. But no, I think, the goal has been stated. They need to make the playoffs. It is not inspiring that their approach seems to be that once you get in the playoffs, anything can happen, that the idea of building a team that should be one of the league's best, as the best sort of way to win the Stanley Cup is not the approach they are terribly interested in. You're absolutely right that the question was like the question got asked in our little AMA that we hosted on Wednesday. What happens if they don't make the playoffs? And generally, I think the sense is that it is exactly that. Like this is make or break. Like this really is the year. My impression is internally, essentially, that management was told, like last year was accepted as sort of a write-off, that the fact that they did dial back on spending, were forced into some decisions that were sort of, what's the best bet you can make with this this sort of small bag of money? This isn't an unlimited account. What's the best bet? Can we make it happen? Maybe we'll get lucky. That was sort of the directive from ownership, and we saw what happened. I mean, they were already in a struggle to make the playoffs even before they got COVID. Yeah, maybe they would have had Thatcher Demko turn red hot again, but don't forget that hot run in March, before they got sick, was all about the goalie. I mean, they weren't actually playing that great in front of him. And just so the idea that, your goalie alone was going to carry you to the playoffs. Yeah, there was, it wasn't like it was a lock in front of them, in terms of who was qualifying. But it wasn't like they were in a great position. So anyway, last season was a write-off. And essentially this season has been given, essentially they've been said, this is your chance to make it happen. And so it's going to be, it is interesting just from that standpoint. Absolutely. You know what? It's a team, they forever are running along the knife's edge, right? So you don't have Travis Hamonic. We don't know if and when he'll be back. That alone, sort of turns their planning on its side. And, whatever you think of Travis Hamonic's true talents, he's not the player that he was in Long Island. By the end of last year, I think he was doing okay, but it wasn't like this was a guy that, teams were desperate to have in their lineup. You take him out of the lineup nonetheless, that changes their planning, and that makes the planning on the back end. Now we're seeing Kyle Burroughs get a chance. Kyle Burroughs is a very under the radar guy. But a guy who himself admits he knows part of the reason that he's even here. I mean, he believes he's done the best you can with his opportunity, but he realizes that opportunity is basically because Travis Hamonic's not here. So that alone is your planning. And then up front, you lose Brandon Sutter. You've got Justin Dowling in the lineup, who is supposed to be number 5. He's playing fourth line center now. So all of a sudden he's on the power play because they need someone to take draws, which to me is just massively overthinking it. Because that means Niels Hoglander is not on your power play, which is just, on your second unit, which you need to make a viable force.
Yeah.
You lose. So, you're on this knife's edge, you're never going to be able to replace Besser straight up, but there's nothing coming up behind. You lose 2 depth wingers. It's not like they're going to win the Stanley Cup with Jonah Gadrich or Zach McEwen, but just that nice edge that they're on this year. It is precarious. And, so, they'll be more fun to watch. Connor Garland, I think, is going to be really, just in the glimpses we've seen of him, he was very hard on himself last week after, I think, his last game, saying, I didn't play that well. But, he's fun. He gets the puck. He tries to make stuff happen. He moves his feet. Like, he's a very fun little player. And so it's a team that is going to be interesting. They should be in the mix for the playoffs. It's a weird division. Vegas is kind of the number 1, and then it's a bit of a scrap for 2, 3, 4. It's gonna be interesting. And then like you said, this is their best step forward, which is, in the end, it's not like they're a contender or anything.
Well, I think so this is the interesting conversation. You say, Gadjevich and Lind or McEwen won't help them that's not the difference between them winning a Stanley Cup. I'd argue that, Burroughs and Hamonic are in that same discussion.
Yeah.
But if the hope is that they make the playoffs and they do show better this year, and you're hoping to build a little, there's no, honestly, Patrick, like I don't even want to say I hope I'm wrong. There's no chance in the world to me that they're winning a Stanley Cup this year. No. I mean, teams can get hot and they can go on a run, but I just don't see this as a Stanley Cup squad. But they get to the playoffs and they take a step forward. Jim Benning gets a little more job security. What does this team need?
Yeah.
Like, where do you see it needs to add going forward to take those steps? Because, I hate putting too much stock in what we see on social media.
Yeah.
But, just making the playoffs is the lowest of low bars, which is where people are now after 7 years. But this franchise has not won a Stanley Cup, and I sense that there is a significant segment of the Canuck fan base that is getting impatient. And 82 was magical, and 94 was so nice, and 2011 was the first real legit good team that had delivered playoff success on top of their pedigree and hadn't just got hot. But if this team is, as we've heard with the contract sagas, with a guy like Elias Pettersson, if they are going to be competitive in 3 years and not just like make the playoffs, look to be one of the top teams in the NHL, and then potentially 3, 4, 5 years from now, legit contend to win a Stanley Cup, what do they need?
Well, you look at the way this roster is constructed, and you've got a handful of forwards that are in the early 20s in Pettersson, Podkolzin, Hoglander. You've got JT Miller, and I should say Brock Besser. And you've got JT Miller and Bo Horvat, who are in their late 20s. You need more of, and Jason Dickinson, who's, I guess, 26. Tanner Pearson's 29. You've got sort of a split, which hilariously was what Benny always was worried about. He wanted to have everybody through all the ages, but it's like, that's just not, you shouldn't be thinking about that. Just get good players, you need more good young players. It's pretty simple.
You haven't had a first round draft pick the last 2 years.
And you look at, and they're up front, they're kind of moving in a direction they need to. You still need to keep adding guys. Like, that's one of the amazing things about Tampa, is that they've done such a good job in the last decade, really, not only drafting players but developing players, and just having guys arriving all the time, which is, in the end, part of why JT Miller was available in the first place. He was a player that they had added. They thought maybe he'll help us. And then they looked and they're like, we got other guys. We got to get rid of this guy. And that's why the Canucks were able to get him. They were fortunate in that standpoint. To me, the blue line remains the real worry. Yes, it's great you've got Quinn Hughes locked down long term, right? He's only 22. He's just starting to come into his peak, right? He himself has said, yes, I have to be better defensively. So you hope that works out. If he gets better defensively, then he really is a number one defenseman. That's great. That's the hardest part. In the end, they've committed to Oliver Ekman-Larsson, who's already 30. They need him to be a good. They don't need him to be a great player. They just need to be a good player, which he wasn't the last couple of years in Arizona. But then behind him, it's just, they need more. They need Jack Rathbone, and then they need another guy. And the right side as a whole is a problem. They really like Tucker Pullman, but honestly, you talk to people in Winnipeg, and there's just nothing in the way he played in Winnipeg that says this is a player that you should be committing to the way they did. And, for a 4-year contract, like he's not a hard-nosed player. He doesn't have an offensive skill set. He's a guy that maybe you can have on your third pairing. The Canucks in the end have sort of at best a bunch of third pairing right shot defensemen. Tyler Myers, he threw that big hit. Awesome. Made people feel great emotionally, but let's not forget, it wasn't his fault that the Jesse Puljujärvi goal happened. Like, there was a cascade of failures before that, but the fact that people, sort of glommed on to him and his desperate attempt to sort of stop the shot, he was so goofy looking doing it, reminds you that in the end, people know that he's not a great defender. Like, his strength is up the ice with the puck. And yet he's being paid to be a top pairing defenseman. He's just not a top pairing defenseman. So
someone has to glom onto something, though, Patrick, with Jake Virtanen gone.
Yeah, exactly.
Leo Levy isn't the new scapegoat to come in, so like there's always someone.
Yeah.
Louis Eriksson, right? There's some. Yeah. So unfortunately, I think Myers' contract will breed some of that.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, you need to see this team take steps, and how what's realistic for you this season? Like, what's best case, worst case scenario for you?
Well, yeah, like I said, Vegas is clearly the cream of the crop. We'll see how Seattle goes. They're not an elite offensive team, but they're a very solid two-way team who've made a big bet on a very good goalie. So defensively, they stand a chance of being one of the I guess behind Vegas, the second best defensive team in the division. Probably have enough scoring to make the playoffs. LA annihilated Vegas last night, which it's the second game of the season.
There's 82 games, yeah.
It's 82 games. But the Kings, that's the kind of season the Kings are hoping to have. Like, they've got their aged core. Anze Kopitar had a hat trick last night, but this isn't Anze Kopitar's team anymore. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be the kids' team, and they got a bunch of exciting young players. And the kind. I've talked about this elsewhere, but the idea that you want your young guys to surprise you and come along quicker than you were hoping, and the Kings are kind of in that spot. And I think right, are thinking rightly in those terms. So the Kings are in the mix for the top four. The Ducks don't look that great. The Sharks don't look that great. Then it's down to sort of the Flames, the Canucks, and the Oilers for that fourth spot. we'll see. It's going to be
That's
a bit of
best case scenario for you this season.
yeah.
Is scrapping for
third
fourth
or
spot?
fourth. Hey, listen, Seattle. Maybe Seattle doesn't work. Maybe the Kings actually aren't able to maintain it just because that's a thing that young players, it's not just you can't play 100%, 110%. You know what I mean? You have to
Yep.
learn how to play at like 95% just because of the schedule and just the challenge of playing the best players every night. And so maybe the Kings, the Kings are not I don't think gonna win the division or anything like that, but they should be in the fight for the playoffs. But the point is that in the end, there's kind of 5 teams fighting for 3 spots. So the Canucks, the Kings, the Kings, the Kraken, the Oilers, and the Flames are all kind of fighting for those spots. And yeah, I don't think San Jose and I don't think Anaheim are going to have enough there to really kind of get in that. And you know what? Maybe the Canucks aren't going to be that good either. But I'm trying to be an optimist here. I'm like I said, they've made some interesting moves up front. Thatcher Demko. They need. A lot of this, of course, relies on Thatcher Demko having a strong year. So there's a lot in there, but it's all a bit foggy. Going into this season.
Last thing then, because we could literally talk for an hour, but we won't, because we do want people to keep watching.
There's too much work to do, Paul.
Yeah, I know you got a long day ahead of you. So when we frame this Canucks team and where they are, I mean they've got some elite talent. We know about Pettersson and Hughes, and then next level you go Besser, Horvat, and without where they are 3 years from now, without 2 picks from the last 2 years stepping in, they do need their other guys to hit. And I know they're high on Klimovich from this year, but that's who knows 2-3 years ago.
But he's like
Podkolzin,
he's a couple years away. Like he's not.
Oh yeah,
no,
that's what I'm saying. So you need your elite prospects to hit. Podkolzin is the other guy for me this year, where I think everyone, again, taking for granted that they're not going to win the cup, but you want to see progress. What do you see for Podkolzin this year? What should fans expect, and what's the best case, worst case scenario for him?
Yeah, I mean, in the end, let's be honest, a pretty quiet preseason. Had some glimmers later on. We saw his ability to make plays with the puck, like his vision. I think he's starting on the 4th line. There's sort of, I think the team's been smart about not trying to hype him up, give him a chance to kind of grow into sort of the NHL, if you will. I don't think he's going to compete for the Calder. Like, let's be clear. But I think what you're looking at is a player who, and I don't want to make this sound like I'm underselling him, but who is very, very competent in everything he does. He's a guy that in the end you go put him on the ice, you're not going to worry about him, and then he's going to, then you need him to grow into something more. And that's, I think, the task. You want to see that by the end of the season, a bit like how his season went with SKA last year, in that he didn't play a ton early on, went to the World Juniors, was used weirdly by Igor Larionov, but really found his way by the end of that tournament on a I think underwhelming Russian team. And then comes back and just is on a constant upward trajectory with SKA in the KHL, and just by the playoffs was an important performer for that team. Not a key performer, but was an important player and had a strong playoff for a team that's quite deep. And that's not a common thing for a young player in Russian hockey. They tend to kind of go with their veterans and not give the kids much time. But a recognition that he had been getting better and better over the year went. So you want to see that this year, that you want to see as he understands his teammates, adapts to life in English, and understands, how the game is played a little bit over here. The fact that the rinks are just wider in the KHL for the most part. You're playing with a little less space along the boards. The defensemen are a little bit closer to you. But he's a guy that likes to play in traffic. So, I mean, his style of play is suited to the way the game is here. So, by Christmas, you hope that, he's just there he is. Oh, he's on the 3rd line. I mean, he's fortunate that Niels Höglander right now is kind of the guy that even Travis Green himself said is the guy that he's, being looked to kind of be the plug and play Mr. Fix-It a little bit. You can jump him around the lineup, and he's kind of the talking point right now because it's his second season. It's Podkolzin can just kind of fly under the radar under there, but you still need to see
development, of course.
You need to see development. He's a guy that, in the end, if he can be killing penalties, like that's a good sign. Like they looked at him a little bit in preseason. He's got the smarts to do it. Can he put it all together, quickly will be the question.
Great stuff. Well, I think we'll leave it there. Patrick, I know you got a long day.
Yeah.
You're going to watch tonight. You can catch Patrick's stuff at theprovince.com, vancouversun.com, and also please sign up for our newsletter. Daily newsletter, Canuck Report. You'll find it on our website. Easy to get, stuff delivered every game day to your box, including these videos, amongst many other things. So thanks for watching, everyone. Patrick, you have a great day. Enjoy the atmospheric river.
I already have.
Yeah, I'm not cooking bacon in the background if you can hear that. That's just the rain on the roof.
Hopefully we'll get one more outdoor video between the two of us.
Oh, believe me, we will, even if I'm outside with an umbrella.
Okay.
Cheers.